as batting average of balls put in play. So when they make contact, they're the best at turning those into hits. They don't hit a lot of ground balls either. They're making good, solid contact, driving the ball, obviously hitting a lot of home runs. So you're not going to get too many easy outs against this Vanderbilt team coming up this weekend. And what really stands out about them is when you look at the numbers of their lineup itself, their 1 through 9 is great in general, but their 1 through 5 is absolutely nasty. So you go from Christian Moore in the leadoff spot to Dylan Drelling batting 5th, playing left field. All 5 of those guys, when they're 1 through 5, all have an OPS over 1,000. And Christian Moore specifically at 1221. That's really good. His slugging percentage is insanely high at 778. Their entire 1 through 9 has a great on-base percentage. Like these guys kill you in a lot of ways. And again, there's a lot of power there. Hit a lot of home runs. Get a ton of extra base hits. You're gonna have a tall task ahead of you this weekend if you're the South Carolina pitching staff trying to keep this offense at bay. And you better be on your absolute best performances over the course of 3 days if you want any shot of escaping Knoxville with even a lone win. You know what I mean? Like, that's how tough this is going to be. On the pitching side of things, they have 3 very solid starters. Starting off, their usual game 1 guy now is Chris Stamos, originally bullpen guy. Moved on to start a little bit later on in the season. Doesn't really go deep into games. Hasn't gone past 3 innings, 3 total innings pitched this season, but effective. Has lowest batting average on the team on batting average allowed. Had 5 strikeouts in 2 2/3 against Vanderbilt this past weekend. AJ Causey, who is truly their best all-around pitcher, it seems like, kind of comes in and works that long relief for him, similarly to what we see with like Roman Kimball and Ty Good. So Causey comes in after Stamos, gives you a lot of innings, team leader in strikeouts. So that's likely the matchup that you're going to have to deal with coming up tomorrow night. Moving to game number 2, got Drew Beam, who will go pretty deep into games, 5-6 innings. Reminds me a lot of Eli Jones when you look at his numbers, as he's somebody that's going to give up a decent amount of hits, but does a pretty good job of mitigating the damage as far as runs earned in the game. Now, that being said, he did give up 5 runs last weekend in his start against Vanderbilt. The bullpen was able to lock things down at the end, and Tennessee was still able to win that game, though. So something to look out for in likely Friday night's game. And then you wrap things up on Saturday. You have Xander Sechrist, who has been through a bit of a dip here as of late. Only gone 2 total innings of work in his last 2 outings. Did some deeper stuff a little bit earlier on in the season, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, with Chris Stamos and AJ Causey. Kind of a similar situation with Xander Sechrist and Nate Snead, who comes in out of the bullpen after him, typically works long relief, puts up some decent numbers. So kind of the two opposite ends of the weekend for them. Kind of do a similar thing where you have a opener and then a guy in kind of mid relief, and then the bullpen comes in and does a pretty good job of locking things down. So Carolina again last weekend offensively wasn't bad. I mean, you average 7 runs a game. That usually should be enough to get at least a win or 2 over the course of an SEC weekend. But again, they just could not stop the bleeding for what Georgia's offense was able to do to them. So got to regroup and got to get yourself back in the right headspace for this weekend matchup against Georgia. And that's the interesting thing. Pitching is such a mind game. Pitchers are known to be head cases. And when you have a collective staff outside of Garrett Gainey that looked as poor as they did this past weekend against Georgia, I just wonder what that psyche and makeup is. Because when you talk about these guys. They're between 18 and 22 years old. You know, think about and this isn't a knock on them. This is just a commentary on people that age in general, that emotional immaturity that you still have, to where it's harder to let things go. It's harder to shake off, doing something to embarrass yourself or doing something wrong in your life. You think about it a lot. It weighs on you. It eats at you in the back of your mind, and eventually it goes away. But, we're talking about 5 days later before going out there again against Tennessee. Like, it's not going to be completely out of their mind, no matter how much Kingston and staff try and drill that in your head. Hey, put it behind you. Forget about it. It is not that easy to do. So I just wonder about this team's psyche and where they sit mentally going into this weekend, and how much that could potentially hurt them, because, it's one thing to have a rough outing like against Georgia and then go out there and play maybe Missouri the next week and say, okay, well, we didn't play great against Georgia, but we're going up against an easier opponent where we can get our feet back underneath us. No, you're going on the road, taking on literally the best team in the country in a park that favors their offensive style quite a bit. Carolina's going to score its runs. Carolina's going to get home runs this weekend, all that stuff. But you could run into another situation where you're losing games, 16-12 or something like that. You know what I mean? So it's going to be interesting to see, how Carolina fares on the road at Knoxville coming up this weekend. First pitch tomorrow night, coming up at 6:30 with 6:15 pregame. Same thing on Friday night, and then the series wraps up on Saturday, 12:45 pregame and a 1 o'clock first pitch out there in Knoxville. And then it'll be on to Hoover next week, and seeing, if South Carolina can do any damage there in a place that historically has not really been all that good to them. So we'll see. But again, got to get through Tennessee this upcoming weekend. We heard more from Coach Kingston yesterday as he talked to the media, setting the table for this matchup and talking a little bit about motivation and mentality for this South Carolina team. That is coming up next. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you. Remember, you can always watch us on the Game TV, sponsored by our friends at Shepherd's Glass. Hello, as I wave to the camera, and powered by our friends over at Integrated Media. You can also check us out on the 107.5 The Game app. Give it a download on the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, and take us with you wherever you go. More Coach Kingston coming up next, previewing Tennessee series tomorrow night. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Wednesday here on The Game. Canty Foundation Specialist wants you to be aware of what foundation problems could look like within your home. Those things could be cracks in your exterior brick, cracks in walls or above windows and door frames, doors and windows that might be a little bit sticky, uneven or bouncy floors, or cracks over your garage door. If you notice any of these things going on around your home, you could have serious foundation issues. If you have those serious foundation issues, our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist can help you out. Go online to cantycanfixit.com and schedule an appointment, and a Canty Foundation Specialist will send a professional out to your house to evaluate your foundation issues and get your home fixed up right so you and your family can live comfortably going forward. Again, Canty Foundation Specialist, head online for an appointment at cantycanfixit.com. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on your Wednesday on the game. Again, Coach Kingston talking to the media yesterday, getting ready for this matchup with Tennessee coming up. First game tomorrow on the game here. 6:30 first pitch, pregame coverage starting at 6:15. And anytime you play a top dog in the country, you should always be fired up. And as I mentioned a moment ago, you got to be in the right mindset of, coming off of last weekend's tough outing against Georgia. And you want to have the right motivation going into this weekend. And, sometimes losing the way you did can fire you up because that's your lowest point. And you want to be able to go out there and prove to people that you are better than that. And we'll see how Carolina responds. Let's go with cut number 3 here, Dave. Here's Coach Kingston talking about the motivation of playing a top team this weekend.
Well, it feels like we've played top 1, 2, or 3 teams all year, so this is nothing new to us. We have played now, after this weekend, we will have played the top 7 RPI teams in the country, every single one of them, all 7. And so we're used to playing the best of the best, and we're used to winning games against the best of the best, and this will probably be as big a challenge as we've had because it's now on the road to finish the season. So it's a challenge, it's an opportunity, and it's up to us to take advantage of.
And he's right. Carolina is no stranger to playing the best teams. When you play in the SEC, that's routinely what you're running into. No matter how your schedule ends up shaking out, you're likely to play the number 1 team or a couple of number 1 teams over the course of the entire season. And Carolina has played its share of teams within the top 5. And again, you've had, you're sweeping against Vanderbilt, who again was like 3 when that series took place earlier on this season. You had the ability to take down Kentucky a couple weeks ago. You lost 2 out of 3 against Arkansas. So it's been a little bit back and forth. And then I know Georgia wasn't a top 5 team last weekend, but they certainly looked like it with the way they hit the ball. And it certainly have one of the best offenses in all of, in all of college baseball so far this season. So how do you respond? How do you go out there this weekend against Tennessee and make things look better? When you look at the mentality of this team, as I mentioned, how do you get your head right? Coming away from the weekend, I know you had Sunday off to, enjoy Mother's Day and all that kind of stuff, to get away from baseball for a day and then lock back in on Monday and hopefully make the improvements over the course of the past couple of days to feel good about where you're at heading into Knoxville coming up tomorrow night. But cut number 4 here, Dave. Here is Kingston talking about the team's mentality going into this weekend.
Guys are fine. Look, it's a long season. The SEC, I've said it a million times, if you're looking to go undefeated, don't play in the SEC. If you're looking to have glossy records, this is probably not the league for you. This is a league about being really good, surviving it, and then getting to the postseason. Most of the time for most of the teams. Obviously, some teams go on a magical run and they get to the point where they have everything in place to dominate our league. It doesn't happen very often. But for the most part, our league is about surviving it, staying as even keel as you can through the 30-game marathon that our league is, and then get to the postseason and get hot. That's how Mississippi State did it and won a national championship. That's how Ole Miss did it and won a national championship. That's what our league is.
I understand what he's saying, and look, when posed with the question of, what's your team's mentality, of course, he's going to say it's good. He's not going to say, I don't know, these guys are really down on themselves, and I don't know how we're going to do this weekend. Like, of course, he's going to tell you that the team is feeling good and they've got their minds in the right places, whether that's true or not, because no coach is going to admit if their team is truly, in bad shape. But I look at something that he said there that gets brought up a lot. And look, we've been guilty of doing it ourselves. This comparison to Ole Miss and Mississippi State a couple of seasons ago, where, Ole Miss has an up and down regular season and they turn it on in the postseason, going to win the national championship. Yes, that's true. But at the same time, where you're at right now, which is closing out your regular season, is not the same compared to what they did. Ole Miss won 8 of their last 11 games in the regular season that year, including 5 wins against ranked teams. South Carolina is not in position to do that. unless you go out there and sweep against Tennessee, which, again, I don't think is going to happen this weekend. Again, I think you're lucky to walk out of there with one game. And then Mississippi State the year before that, they won 10 of 13 in the month of May. Now, yes, both teams lost in Hoover. Mississippi State got bounced, one and done, and then I believe Ole Miss was 0-2 out there in Hoover before turning it on in the NCAA tournament once again. But again, their month of May ended up being really, really good. And Carolina, I don't see that being the same thing. I think they would be not only limping into Hoover, potentially limping into the NCAA tournament should things not go the way that they want to this weekend. But at the same time, if that's your motivating factor, if that's what you're using to fire up your team, I get it. And by all means, use that. You know what I mean? Like if you can say, hey, Ole Miss did this, whoever did this in years past, we can be just like them. That's fine. If that's what you need to motivate this team and fire them up for this weekend series against Tennessee, I get it. Do that. Again, I'm being critical from the standpoint of looking at it through the true context of what actually happened. But if you can put those blinders on, if you can pull the Kirby Smart type thing, I guess in kind of a reverse way where you have an amazing team and tell them they're not that amazing, telling a national championship team they're going to go 7-5 and motivating them that way. Kind of on the reverse of this, you have a team that's not in a good place right now and tell them, hey, we can still win the national championship because here's what Ole Miss did. Like, that's what you can. If that's your way of doing it, okay, I get it, and we'll see if that translates. This weekend against Tennessee, and then we'll see whatever happens in Hoover, which again is not a place that has treated South Carolina all that well over the years, particularly in Kingston time here, here at South Carolina. Plenty more conversation about Tennessee to come as the day goes along. For that first matchup coming up tomorrow night, 6:30 first pitch, pregame coverage starting at 6:15 right here on the game. And, of course, another baseball game means another opportunity for you to win, hopefully, the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. Just shy of $1,300 right now as we've yet to see a Grand Slam this season. Hopefully somebody can win this weekend against Tennessee. And if so, you can win all that money. Just head online to 1075thegame.com and register for your chance to win the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. And we'll have a great big celebration if somebody can manage to hit one this weekend, because that could go a long way in potentially picking up a win up there in Knoxville. Talks of pro football coming up next. Our guy Demetri Ravenos is going to be joining me as he does each and every Wednesday for a couple segments. And we'll dive into the NFL schedule release coming up tonight. Do we care? Should we care? That's next. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head with you here on the game. Busy time over at Twin Peaks, as it always is. We are getting down to the crunch of a couple of big postseasons in professional sports. You have basketball postseason that is getting nearer and nearer to the conference finals, as well as professional hockey, and there is truly no better place take in all that great action than with our friends over at Twin Peaks, right down the street here in the Vista. So if you're in Columbia, you don't got to go far to get TVs as far as the eye can see. An amazing drink menu that is truly second to none. Extensive bourbon, whiskey cocktails, the whole 9 yards. And you can't forget about those 29-degree man-size draft beers. Look for a place taking great sports action this weekend. I can't think of a better place than our friends at Twin Peaks over in the Vista.
All right, can you hear me? Yes, sir. All right, we're good then.
Welcome back into the Extra Point. Tyler Head with you here on this Wednesday, as he does each and every Wednesday. I got Demetri Ravenos joining me for a couple of segments here, and I think it's very appropriate that Demetri is with me as we always talk some pro sports. As one of the biggest days of the entire NFL calendar is finally upon us, the schedule release coming up tonight, wall-to-wall coverage, 4 hours of TV or whatever it is on NFL Network and ESPN, where we finally find out the dates of games of teams we already know are playing each other. Demetri, are you fired up and excited?
I mean, I'm fired up and excited for what we all are, which are the social media video drops, right? Like the Chargers set the bar pretty high a couple of years ago. The Titans, people trying to identify the team logos, I think is now one of the legendary Twitter video posts. I can't wait to see what teams do this year. And quietly, the Panthers have done pretty good with this. I don't know if you remember last year's, which was sort of a spoof on like the 90s TGIF TV show intros, but the Panthers have quietly been pretty good at this.
Yeah, I remember last year's Panthers one. It was pretty good. And look, every team across the board has really elevated their game. And I think you're right. I think the Chargers kind of sparked this a couple seasons ago, and now that's kind of what this has turned into. Like, I don't tune into the ESPN show and hearing the talking heads debate this for 2 or 3 hours. Like, I go through social media and say, okay, what team is doing what, and spend 15, 20 minutes watching all the videos on how everybody uniquely announces their schedule release. But it goes back to a greater point of something that I talk about a lot. Like, the NFL is such a machine. They make us care about things that we otherwise probably shouldn't care about. Like, again, we know who the opponents are. We know the 17 games that the Panthers are playing this upcoming season. We just don't know what the dates are, the kickoff times, or anything like that. That's essentially what we're getting out of this. And the NFL is just this machine where they can make anything into a must-see event.
Well, and to your point, too, like the NFL is so well controlled that we already know like what the first game of the season is, right? We already know that's going to be Baltimore and Kansas City. We already know what the first Monday night game of the season is. We already know the international kicks, which are going to include the Panthers and Giants playing in Munich. So we get bits and pieces all week long because the NFL is so good at dominating the media conversation around sports, and you're going to get more throughout today up until the schedule is released, because in addition to letting CBS announce their first national game on their morning show, there are also deals worked out to let Adam Schefter break a few, to let Jay Glazer break a few, to let various network insiders break some. So by the time the schedule finally is released for everybody, honestly, a team like the defending Super Bowl champions, the Kansas City Chiefs, they're probably only 4 dates they won't know by the time that comes out.
What did the poor people of Germany do to deserve Panthers and Giants?
They made the mistake of wildly supporting the Seahawks and Buccaneers a few years ago. And it taught the NFL that the amount of U.S. servicemen, both active and retired, that have made that area their home, be it permanently or temporarily, will support any NFL game that goes there.
I guess so. I'm very interested to see what the Christmas Day games are going to look like this year, as Christmas is on a Wednesday. The NFL says, yeah, we're still going to play, and supposed to have, I believe, 3 games on that day, as they officially just tell the NBA, like, no, this is our day now. You've had it for a long time. We decided we wanted it. And like they've done with many other days on the sports calendar in the second half of the year, the NFL is just like, yeah, it's ours now. We're going to get best ratings. And what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, I mean, look, college football fans learned it last year, right? The NFL decided they wanted Black Friday, so there was a Black Friday game last year. What's going to be interesting, and I'll I guess, move the curtain back on our industry a little bit, Tyler, is this week, all of the networks, all the TV networks are presenting their fall schedule and all of their big events to advertisers up in New York. Each network or streamer is going on a different day Today, Netflix is making their presentation, and the heavy belief is they are going to announce that the Christmas Day games this year are going to be on Netflix. And I've heard conflicting reports. I've heard 3, I've heard 2, but certainly we are going to get Christmas Day games from the NFL on a Wednesday. And I think it is probably fair to assume this is the first step down a long road to NFL every day of the week once it is in season.
Yeah, pretty much. You know, they already had a stranglehold on 3 days of the week. You know, once college football kind of moves out of the way in early December, they take over Saturdays. In fact, they're going to go head-to-head with the college football playoff in December, and they even warned the CFP, like, hey, you probably don't want to do this because we're going to have some pretty big games going on here. They didn't remove. They're like, all right, fine, we're going to put games on Fox and NBC. Good luck with that, and they'll probably win those ratings too. So, you know, they control what they want to control, and if they want to take over Christmas and every other day between, you know, December 26th and December 31st and just put all the bowl games to shame, they'll do that too. You know, that is completely within the NFL's realm.
Yeah, and the thing about the bowl games is most of them, this is not true of the college football playoff, but this is true of most bowl games. ESPN, Fox, whoever owns these bowl games, and it's almost overwhelmingly ESPN, they don't really need people to buy tickets. They really don't need people to even watch as long as those sponsorships are sold. But
Sure.
Those sponsorships are shorter and shorter than ever before. So we'll see if this combined with the college football playoff ends up making it really tough for some of those bowl games like, you know, the one in Myrtle Beach or even as big as the one in Charlotte to exist in the future if you are not a marquee matchup.
You're telling me the famous Toastery Bowl at UNC Charlotte Stadium is not a marquee game?
Wait a minute. Is it not the Duke's Mayo Bowl anymore?
Well, you were talking about the other one. Sorry about that. There are 2 games in Charlotte now. So you have the famous Toastery Bowl, and then you have the Duke's Mayo Bowl.
I think the famous Toastery Bowl was a 1-year only thing as the stadium in the Bahamas was being renovated.
Oh,
right?
my goodness. That is right. That was a temporary thing because the Bahamas and Charlotte are practically the same thing.
That's right. That's right. Please do not poo-poo the history of the Popeyes Bahamas Bowl.
Well, I'm sure you enjoy spending so much time in the tropical paradise that is Charlotte, North Carolina.
That's right. That's right.
Speaking of Charlotte and the Panthers, who will find out the dates of their opponents coming up tonight, just like everybody else, you know, we transitioned away from the draft. We obviously talked about Xavier Legette and what is expected of him in this offense. They also added a couple other interesting pieces in the draft as well to add to an offense that, again, needs a lot of help. You have Jonathan Brooks, the running back from Texas, who got injured halfway through last season and is obviously recovering from that. You also had Jatavian Sanders at tight end to a tight end room that, like a lot of things on this team, seemed to be pretty underwhelming a season ago.
Yeah, and it seems like Sanders and Legette almost certainly are going to be part of the first group of 11 guys that take the field each and every week. I think Brooks is eventually going to get there, but the Panthers are going to be cautious regarding his injury and when it is he is ready to be the bell cow back everybody believes. But if you look at the reports coming out of rookie minicamp right now, first of all, everybody is in love with Xavier Legette, both from a talent and personality perspective. But Jatavian Sanders, and granted, he is not in competition right now with anybody because the other tight ends are not there. But I talk to a lot of people that cover this team and cover rookie camp every day, and they say the coaches are talking like it's a foregone conclusion. This guy's going to be at the top of the tight end depth chart this season.
Well, and I look at, you know, the numbers that he put up when he was, you know, at Texas over the course of a couple seasons, and obviously pretty high production, you know, over 600 yards both those years, had 7 total touchdowns between the 2 seasons, and what was a very, you know, high-octane type of offense there playing with Quinn Ewers. And how that translates to the NFL, I don't know. But again, when you kind of look at the numbers, it is something that can excite you going into this year.
Yeah, and also, you know, like you mentioned it, right? The tight end room in Charlotte is not overwhelming. I mean, if anything, they were shedding pieces and never really settled on anybody as their kind of alpha dog tight end until they were forced to when Hayden Hurst was out. But I do think that there is an opportunity there. I've always thought that Jatavian Sanders was better than a 4th-round talent, which is where the Panthers ended up taking him, so I'm not surprised. I think the thing that is a little bit surprising, and look, I think Deontay Johnson and Xavier Legette are both more naturally talented than Adam Thielen, but given what he meant to Bryce Young in the quarterback's rookie season, I am surprised that nobody is pushing back on our top dog receiver last year is going to be kicked into the slot. I think it's the right move. I'm just surprised that it is being made with no hesitation or second thought.
Yeah, and that is important to note because, you know, while the production was not certainly what it, you know, was hoped to be, there was obviously good chemistry there. And again, Thielen's been around the game for a long time, so he was the perfect kind of guy to kind of put the arm around Bryce Young and guide him along in his rookie year in the NFL. And I don't doubt that, you know, him and Legette can have good chemistry together in time, but there's no guarantee it's going to be that same spark right away that you seem to have with Young and the experienced Thielen.
Yeah, for sure. And look, given everything that has been added this year, Bryce Young has to improve, right? He's just got to, or the Panthers have to think about what they do at the quarterback position going forward. I will say also, the Ross Tucker football podcast had a great conversation with Eric Eager this week, who is the Panthers' new sort of analytics advisor. And Eager was making the case for, you know, if you look at this in betting terms, the totals listed for NFL games have been ridiculous. The vast majority of games are going under, and it's because defenses are getting better. There is less opportunity to make a big play. It is harder to score touchdowns. So now you have to look at every drive as the value is not just about did you put points on the board, but how much time did you take off of the clock, which I think is going to take a little bit off of Bryce Young's plate in terms of what they are trusting him to do. I think it's the reason that there are so many running backs in the running back room right now and why the first two big investments of this offseason were in the middle of the offensive line. I think ball control is going to be the name of the game this season in Charlotte.
Absolutely. Well, they can't get much worse than they were a season ago. We'll see what kind of improvements they can make with what they've added.
Don't give anyone any ideas.
That is very true. It can't always get worse, I guess. And you know, until you go 0-17, which nobody's done yet, you know, we can't set the ceiling or can't set the floor too low there. But again, the Panthers, like everybody else, will find out the dates of who their schedule for coming up this year, with schedule release coming up later on tonight. Up next, a sports radio host has gotten a coaching job in college basketball. Is there hope for any of us to potentially have an extra career outside of the microphone? We'll dive into that coming up next. It is The Extra Point. He's Demetri Ravenos. I'm Tyler Head with you on your Wednesday on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you. Demetri Ravenos hanging out with me for a couple of segments as he does each and every Wednesday. Doug Gottlieb is a name you might be familiar with. Played some college basketball back in the day. Was at Notre Dame, Oklahoma State. Played at a couple international leagues, some pro leagues in America outside of the NBA. But for the better part of the past 2 decades, he's been behind a microphone, much like Demetri and I are doing right now, talking sports, most recently on Fox Sports Radio. So imagine the surprise of many people, including myself, to learn yesterday that Mr. Gottlieb has been hired as the new head coach at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay, despite having 0 head coaching experience and, again, only doing radio for the past 20 years.
Well, now the 0 coaching experience and coming straight from the media is not crazy to me, right? Like JJ Redick is a hot candidate in the NBA for coaching jobs right now. He has 0 coaching experience. What is crazy, Tyler, is the news is, and I texted Doug to confirm this, and he says it is absolutely true. He's going to keep doing his national radio show on Fox Sports Radio while being the head coach at Wisconsin Green Bay.
Are you familiar with the show Parks and Rec?
I am, yes.
The character of Ron Swanson, played by Nick Offerman.
By Nick Offerman, yeah.
He has a famous quote that says, never half-ass 2 things, whole-ass 1 thing.
Right.
You and I do this for a living. I know what it takes to prep a show, especially one by yourself, and the hours and hours that takes the day before. I can't imagine trying to do that while also coaching a Division I basketball team and the practices and the recruiting and all that kind of stuff. There's not enough hours in the day.
No, absolutely. I mean, it is, I guess the only fair thing to say here is if you have had any doubts or been critical at all of Deion Sanders for not devoting his whole attention to this job, tell me how this is any different, right? It'll fly under the radar because nobody could even tell you, that there was a college basketball team in Green Bay, let alone what their mascot is, until yesterday, probably. But, man, if they have some laughable record here, I don't think anybody's going to give this guy a whole lot of coverage. I mean, I think it's going to be a whole lot of criticism coming his way.
They are the Green Bay Phoenix. That's kind of a random mascot, but sure. But yes, they don't garner a lot of attention. I can't even pronounce the name of the city that they are in Wisconsin. That is a mouthful.
Is it not Green Bay?
I guess it might be like a suburb of Green Bay.
Okay.
Is Ashwaubenon, I think, in Wisconsin. Anyway,
I'm guessing.
Yeah,
but even
sounds good enough.
Who knew Green Bay was big enough to have suburbs?
Exactly. I thought it was. I thought literally Lambeau Field was the only thing in Green Bay. I've never been up there. It looks too cold for me. It begs the question, though. Who is the next sports media personality that could potentially be plucked off the desk or behind the microphone to find their way into the coaching range? You mentioned JJ Redick, and that's a good pull there. I got Get Up on my TV right now. Can we get Greenberg to coach the Jets if they fire Robert Saleh?
Do you think Greenberg would have what it takes to command presence in a locker room?
Probably not. But
by the way, Get Up's record with going from Get Up to being a coach is not very good. Remember, that is where Jeff Saturday came from.
That is
when
very
he
true.
Took over the Indianapolis Colts.
To be fair, Jeff Saturday was very much in over his head on that one. I don't think anybody thought that was going to work.
Well, so let's sort of look at the history here. Like this has happened in a number of sports. I think that Saturday is the only one any of us can remember in either the NFL or college football where you go directly with no prior experience at all. But the guy that won a World Series for the Arizona Diamondbacks, Bob Brenly, came out of the booth to be that team's manager, and eventually they won a World Series. Now you could obviously argue how much he had to do with any of that.
Now, Jeff Saturday didn't have no experience. He was coaching at Hebron Christian in Decula, Georgia, prior to taking over the Colts job. So not without experience, just not high-level experience.
Yeah, no, very, very fair. I guess, when it's all about molding young men into molding boys into men, that is all the experience you need. So remember, Chauncey Billups went straight from ESPN to being the coach of, the coach of the Blazers now, the Trailblazers?
Right. So it's
So
not.
it's happened.
It's not unprecedented. If a team is calling with a job offer for Demetri Ravenos, which one are you taking straight from the microphone to the head coaching position?
I feel like I am doing. Look, we have seen this a lot in college basketball. I'm taking a basketball job, and I am just finding the 5 tallest, fastest guys I can and rolling a ball out there and saying, "Have fun, boys." Like, certainly, dudes have made careers out of coaching that way.
You're not wrong. And hey, here's the great thing about coaching at a high level of Division One. Eventually, when you're not performing well and they fire you, you get a really big buyout coming your way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like this goes back to something that we have talked about before with being the head coach at Auburn. If your goal is just to be there for 2 years and get fired, there's good money in that.
Oh, absolutely. You can set yourself up for life for sure. That's Demetri Ravenos joining me as he does each and every Wednesday. Appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, good talking to you, Tyler.
Coming up hour number 2, we'll get to some Beamer sound. He's at the Welcome Home event in Spartanburg. What do you have to say about the offense? That's next here on the game. 10 o'clock, hour number 2. Welcome back into the Extra Point here on the game. Tyler Head along with you on your Wednesday morning. I've taken a couple sips of my Monster energy drink, so I'm wide awake now. Came in a little bit sleepy in the last hour. We were fired up and ready to go. Doug Gottlieb conversation got me juiced there in that last segment, too. That's always a fun thing to talk about as Gottlieb brings more attention to the city of Green Bay than that basketball program probably has ever had before. Many people probably didn't know there was a Green Bay basketball team. And now I'm going to keep an eye on it to see how he manages being a professional basketball coach, or excuse me, well, you know what? I don't mean excuse me, because now in the era of paying college players, you may as well call these coaches professional coaches because they're coaching athletes that are getting paid now. So interested to see what Gottlieb does. At Green Bay, while also juggling a 3-hour radio show I think he does every single day. I've honestly never listened to Doug Gottlieb's program. I see his takes pop up on Twitter from time to time. More power to him. If he can pull both these things off, that's really, really impressive. But I'm going to be skeptical until I see it done. One person that is devoting all of his time and energy to his job, of course, is Shane Beamer here at South Carolina. He does not have a radio show on the side that he has to worry about other than Carolina calls, obviously. But that's once a week during the season. That's not as big of a deal. Coach Beamer out there grinding the month of May with the welcome home events, seemingly doing one just about every 2 days, it feels like. And when he does that, fortunately for us, he does talk to the media. And I don't just say this because I do this job. I sincerely appreciate a coach that is very good and very friendly with the media, somebody that's not afraid to talk, somebody that's not afraid to give you insight into what's going on in his program. And I wasn't here when Coach Muschamp was, coaching here at South Carolina, but I know he was a little bit more reserved. And from purely a content standpoint, Beamer gives us a lot of good things to talk about and provides us with plenty of stories, and just in general, very friendly with the media, very good, understands the job that everybody's doing. So good to see him, when we do these welcome home events, to be able to get some stuff from him like we were able to do last night. Let's hit on a couple things here. Let's start off, cut number 18 here, Dave. Let's hear him talk about the offensive improvements that can be expected, hopefully, in year number 2 under Dow Loggins.
Yeah, it'll be so different this year because our personnel is different. Quarterback-wise, we go from, Spencer Rattler to a 240-pound quarterback, or Robbie Ashford, our other quarterback, is 235 pounds. Bigger quarterbacks, new running backs. We don't have Xavier Legette anymore. We've got receivers that have a different skill set than what Xavier has. So it'll be different from that standpoint. So that's what spring practice is for. We've added 2 transfer receivers since the end of spring practice. Get them in here in a couple weeks and see how they can help us. And as you do every year, you want to put your offense together, defense, special teams, based on the personnel you have and what their skill sets are. But hopefully, more important than anything, we can stay healthier than what we did last year. And then be able, at the end of the day, we need to be able to run the ball more effectively than what we have. Not just last year, but since I've been the head coach. And that's been very disappointing. We haven't been as efficient running the ball the last 3 seasons as we need to be, and we need to be better there, and that's where it all starts.
There's no denying that the offense as a whole last year was underwhelming. Didn't run the ball very well, which is a part of the reason why Montero Hardesty got moved on from at the end of the season. Obviously, the offensive line did not protect Spencer Rattler at all through most of the season, and you kept rotating in different guys each and every week, it felt like, which didn't help your cause. And outside of, Xavier Legette having his breakout year and Rattler putting up solid numbers despite those issues around him, not a whole lot to hang your hat on when it came to the offense. And again, Carolina's gone out this offseason in the transfer portal and addressed all their areas of need across the board, but specifically when it comes to offense. They have literally almost overstuffed the offensive line room with the sheer amount of bodies and good talent that they've brought in. Obviously, you have, highly touted guys coming in as true freshmen, and Josiah Thompson, Cam Pringle, and Blake Franks. You have guys that are returning last year like Chibabalade, Chavon Ball that got their first taste of SEC experience. You have a guy in Casey Henry that, if he can stay healthy, was supposed to be one of the starters last year that just never could keep himself on the field. Marquis Anderson, who was injured last year, that a lot of people thought could have rotated into the starting lineup. For Sean Lee, who's the most experienced and most versatile guy in the offensive line room. You've gone out Kamar Bell, Torricelli Simpkins, Parks, guys like this that you brought in for the transfer portal. A lot of good, capable guys in this room that if you can stay healthy, hopefully produce a better overall offensive line that can just, at the end of the day, keep Lenore Sellers upright. If you keep Lenore Sellers from getting put on his butt by defenders, more often than not, this offense should be at least okay. And obviously you're going to be a little bit more run heavy this year with the skill set that Sellers brings to the table, paired up with Rocket Sanders in this, RPO style of offense that we expect it to be this year. So it's going to be different, but we got a lot of good pieces to it. I mentioned Rocket Sanders. You've loaded up your running back room. Oscar Attaway should be kind of a good complement piece to what Sanders is doing. You get Jawarren Howell out of the transfer portal from South Carolina State, which had an amazing freshman year out there. DJ Braswell coming back for another year, and we got to see glimpses of him a season ago. Matthew Fuller getting on campus very soon. We'll see what he can do as a freshman. Juju McDowell returning from an injury. Like, you've got a lot of different types of guys in that running back room to use in a variety of ways as well. Plenty of excitement there. The wide receiver room is wide open. You've got more talent than you know what to do with, and a different variety of those guys as well. And we'll get to some specifics of those guys here in just a moment. But you've got plenty of options and different body types, different play styles to do a lot of different things with. And in sitting down and talking with Dow Loggins, like we got to do at Pro Day a couple months ago, I mean, he's just a smart football mind, which, again, every coach is smart when it comes to football, or else they wouldn't be coaching at this level. But just, I love hearing him talk about offense and the way he uses guys, ideas, schemes, that kind of stuff. And that's what excites me about, what you have at like the wide receiver position and so many options. What is Dow Loggins going to do with these options? How is he going to utilize these guys and their skill set to get the most out of them? Now, in this wide receiver room, in the past week in the transfer portal, South Carolina has added 2 new names. That being Dale Von Campbell from Nevada and Vandarius Jacobs from Florida State. Cut number 19 here, Dave. Here is Coach Beamer last night finally being able to comment on the new wide receivers.
Added depth for one. Guys that have, with Dale Vaughn, he's a guy that has played a lot of football, been very productive as a player. We were looking after spring practice to try to add a little bit more size to that room. He's a big receiver as well, and he'll certainly help us there. And just being a veteran guy. And then with Vandravius, he's a guy that highly recruited coming out of high school, and he can run, and that's what we like. He's still young, like the fact that he's still got 4 more years of college as well, and really all we know about him right now is talking to high school coaches, talking to their coaches where they came from, spending time with them when they came in on a visit, watching their tape that they had going into this season. But we'll find out even more about them once they get on campus. But 2 great young men that really enjoyed visiting with when they were here on visits, and excited about how they can just continue to add to the overall depth and competition in that receiver room.
As I mentioned, throughout the spring, where Carolina was, looking to add a couple more wide receivers. And I said, if they didn't get anybody, it's not the end of the world. You got plenty of talent, from not only the winter portal cycle, but also bringing in true freshmen like Mazio Bennett, who, Beamer talked about him as well last night, and we'll get to that maybe a little bit later on, on in the show. But you added these 2 guys that add the depth like you talked about, but with Campbell, you add that area that you were looking for. You wanted somebody with a little more size, with experience, because again, Nick Harbor checks all your boxes as far as attributes for a wide receiver. 6'5", just big, thick, athletic kid that can obviously run really, really fast. He's just not developed where you need him to, though. You bring in a guy like Campbell, who's played a lot of college football between he's at Illinois before going to Nevada, was in a very poor Nevada offense. So you don't quite know what his full potential is, but he checks that box for size to where you can get him down the field, get some of these contested catches, high point balls, those kind of things. And he's in here for 1 year. He's going to come in here, play 1 year, and in his mind, he's going to hopefully improve himself enough to be able to play at the next level. And for South Carolina, again, he fills that need while hopefully Harbor's still coming along. Now, there's a very real chance that Nick Harbor goes into this fall, leaps and bounds better than he was a season ago, and he takes over that wide receiver 1 spot at that X position to play on the outside to be that threat down the field. And then Devon Campbell, he'll still play, but he won't have to be that featured guy like we're expecting him to be right now. That'd be a great scenario, because then Nick Harbor has lived up, or I wouldn't say not lived up, but Nick Harbor's where you wanted him to be. And then he's, the superstar wide receiver that everybody was hoping for. But until you see that for sure, you at least have this safety net, I guess is the best way to say it, and a guy like Devon Campbell at wide receiver. In addition, you bring in Vandrevius Jacobs from Florida State, who's being mentioned, highly touted kid coming out of high school, 4-star, right around that 6-foot range that, Huggins Bruce and, Jared Brown and Larvaday and all those guys kind of around that same kind of similar skill set. But Jacobs has multiple years of eligibility, was a redshirt this past year at Florida State. So he's not somebody that has to come in and contribute right away necessarily. You can, and I know in today's era of the transfer portal, there's no guarantee guys are going to stick around, but, here's somebody that you can bring in and mold a little bit. And I'm sure there are elements of, his game that Coach Furry probably sees himself in a little bit, saying, hey, like this guy, obviously, again, highly touted coming out of high school. Let's get him in here. Let's mold him this way, develop him this way. And then, maybe he doesn't pop this year because there's just so many guys in the wide receiver room. Maybe he's a 2025 guy. Maybe his potential at South Carolina is a little bit later on down the road. Again, I'm just kind of spitballing here because there's so many options in that wide receiver room. I don't know how it's going to shake out. Again, it seems like Larvadane's kind of taken the lead in a way from what we've heard coming through spring practice. But again, we got the entire summer to go through. Got fall camp. That could look drastically different by the time things kick off against Old Dominion in week number 1. So it's a wait and see thing. But again, just specifically talking about the offense, you've added a lot of bodies. You've added a lot of talent that hopefully will translate to a more potent offense than what you had a season ago, which in turn will hopefully translate to more wins as well. Speaking of wins, it was a fun Sunday out at the Darlington Raceway. Myself and Jensen taking in the Goodyear 400. We will give our weekly account of what happened in NASCAR. Coming up next, it is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Wednesday here on The Game.
Gibbs doing all he can to catch him, but Brad Keselowski pulling away. They're getting ready to lose their minds in Rochester Hills, Michigan. Here's Keselowski off the corner.
The drought for Brad Keselowski is about to come to an end, and Ford is going back to victory lane. Off for final time. Brad Keselowski under the checkered flag, and Brad Keselowski has won the Goodyear 400 Darlington Raceway. Career win number 36 for Brad Keselowski. He wins over Ty Gibbs, Josh Berry, Denny Hamlin, and Chase Briscoe.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Points Outhead with you on this Wednesday. That was the crew on the Motor Racing Network on their call of Sunday's finish of the Goodyear 400 out at the Darlington Raceway. Brad Keselowski ending a long winless streak. Ford ending a winless streak of themselves. A lot of things happening over the course of the 400 miles on Sunday that we'll dive into. And Jen Jensen joining me now on the Love Chevrolet phone lines as she does each and every Wednesday. Talk a little bit of racing. Jen, you and I had a very unique perspective on this final or the finish of this race as we were out there on pit road watching it all happen. Brad Keselowski again pulling off a very, very important win versus a driver owner in his Cup Series career.
Exactly, which is pretty neat that this is really the first win since he became an owner and for the team. So that was exciting, I think, for them in general. And yeah, we were actually hanging out down at Reddick's pit, kind of was down there thinking that's probably who's going to end up winning the race. And then all of a sudden things changed and like, oh, I guess better head down to the 6 because what a finish.
Well, you know, and Reddick was at the exit of pit road and conveniently in front of the giant, fan vision screen that helped us follow along with the race. But yes, I thought we were in the right place to be able to watch his crew react. And I was hoping that Michael Jordan was going to be there and maybe we'll get a glimpse of him. But unfortunately, he was not in Darlington on Sunday. But yeah, things quickly turned there in those last couple laps that put the race in Keselowski's hands. And the headline of this is what happened between Chris Buescher and Tyler Reddick, where previously, a few laps, about 30 or so before, in racing for the lead, Keselowski and Reddick get together, and that allows Buescher shoot by, 3 wide move, goes all the way down to the paint on the inside of the front stretch. Crowd goes wild, a great moment, and it looks like he might be on his way to winning at Darlington. And then Reddick, just with this dive bomb move with 10 laps to go, ends up taking both of them out, cutting both their tires, and handing the lead over to Brad Keselowski. And we should have known the tensions were going to be high on pit road after the race. And while no fists were thrown necessarily, there was some heated conversation.
Well, and I think it kind of took the fun out of it for Buescher because Reddick just readily admitted, man, it's me. I totally screwed up. I thought I could make the move, and I definitely wouldn't have taken you out. So he was so apologetic that it's probably Buescher's like, oh, come on, give me a reason. Like, you got to fight me. But, and even after the race, like when we were on pit lane, and Reddick looked really upset. He was very dejected. Like, he knew he screwed up, and he truly hated the fact that he took out Buescher.
And that was the funny thing going back and watching this after I got home is, Buescher was ready to fight. Buescher wanted to come over there and throw some hands. And we've watched a million fights in racing before. And it's typically, hey, driver A is upset with what driver B did. Driver B stands his ground, argues his points, and then they come to blows. And the picker guys get in there, and it just turns into this whole kind of melee. So Buescher was very, taken off guard when Reddick's like, yeah, man, I know I screwed up. I'm so sorry. He wanted to be angrier, but he couldn't because Reddick was admitting what he did wrong.
I know. It's like, darn you for not fighting me. Like, what do I do now? So, yeah. And again, I guess I can appreciate that. It was just a racing mistake. And unfortunately for Buescher, it was the second week that he really could taste a victory. And I think that's what was more painful than anything.
And that's the thing that I keep going back to is put yourself in the mind of Chris Buescher. A week ago, literally, he thinks he wins at Kansas. He's being told on the radio, hey, the scoreboard's showing us, you're the winner, buddy, and enjoyed that for all of 20 seconds before you actually found out that Larson won. So you have this heartbreaking loss that, by the way, is going to get replayed forever because it's the closest finish in NASCAR history. So you're on the butt end of that. And then you go into a race where, let's face it, Buescher didn't have the best car. But he benefited from putting himself in the right position, good pit stops, took advantage of, again, Keselowski and then Tyler Reddick getting into each other. It looked like he was on his way to his first win of the year. And then to have that taken away from you by a ill-advised move. And, I don't fault Reddick for trying the move. I just think he did it too early.
Right.
He had a better car. Yeah. He still had another 10 laps to make a move on Buescher. He didn't need to be that aggressive with 10 to go. Mm-hmm. And again, it ended up ruining both their days. So you have just 2 weeks of heartbreak. And the point that Buescher was bringing up after the race when we're arguing with Reddick's like, you got the win sticker on your car. You're in the playoffs. You know you're going to be a part of the run for the championship. I don't right now. And by the way, I think that put him either above or right on the cut line for where the playoffs stand right now. Like Buescher doesn't have a lot of leeway. He needs a win, and that was taken away from him by Reddick on Sunday.
Yep, 100%. It just was painful, and I'm hoping that he can actually find his way to victory lane, very soon. Because again, look at the RFK cars and how they've really come along, especially in the past few races. I mean, okay, you have Keselowski, who was running really top 4 or 5 all of Darlington, and that was pretty incredible. The speed and the power, and even though Buescher didn't have the best car, he was still extremely competitive. So I'm excited for what's to come with RFK, because it seemed like the company itself has improved with Keselowski being under part of the leadership.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this was, Roush Racing, later Roush Fenway Racing. In the early 2000s, they were one of the best teams in NASCAR. Famously in 2005, they literally took up half the chase field. Out of the 10 drivers in the postseason, they had 5 of them. You know what I mean? Like, they were at the top of their game, and slowly as you lost, Carl Edwards and Matt Kenseth and guys like that to other teams, the production fell off, and they've been a shell of themselves the past 10 years. Brad Keselowski looked at that and said, you know what? I'm going to rebuild this team into a contender, into a championship-level team. Has done an amazing job of that, which is why that win was so special. But not just that. Like, Ford as a whole has made improvements. I was there on Saturday watching practice and keeping up with the lap times, 10-lap averages. Ford as a whole was dominating across the board. Like, they have definitely turned a corner, and I think this is just the beginning of what could be a lot of Ford wins over these next couple of weeks and months leading into the postseason.
Yeah, you are seeing quite the surgence, and they needed that, because, again, how many races this year have they just not been quite as competitive? And now, I mean, they end up with 5 cars in the top 10 for Darlington. That's huge. And I think that as we get ready to head into the second half of the regular season, I think it bodes well for Ford that they're going to see more opportunities for victory lane.
Absolutely. We'll have another opportunity to win this upcoming weekend. Not a points race, but the All-Star race. Obviously very fun at a newly repaved North Wilkesboro Speedway. Going back there for the second time. And Jen, as important as the race is, what's more important is what is happening with these tires. We know the short track package has struggled with the next-gen car. They have these option tires that are made out of the degrading material that makes the wet weather tires that wear very, very quickly. I'm going to be more focused on what happens with these tires and if that is potentially a solution for the lackluster short track racing that's plagued the next-gen car more than I am about who goes on and wins $1 million on Sunday.
I'm with you, because with them having 3 different types of tires that they're going to have as an option for them, the soft slick, then they've got the regular slicks, and then, of course, the rain tire. And we did see at Richmond some of the best racing was in the first stage when they had the more of the, quote, rain tire. That was the best racing. And I'm hoping that, this opportunity to try out all these different tires in this race. They'll start out with the All-Star race with the option tire, but they'll kind of make their own. The teams will make their own decisions as to what tire they want, which I think is. I like the creativity of that and the opportunity and for advancing different drivers or different teams, and I think it's going to be fun to watch the performance of the tires. And like you said, maybe this will be finally what they settle on and say, okay, these are our short track tires.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, you have a bit of a layoff over the course of the next couple months in Iowa. I guess technically counts short track, but I think about Bristol and Martinsville and another trip to Richmond later on the season, true short track races, where if you can have a tire that wears like it did at Bristol back in the spring, and you can guarantee me we're going to have good races there, I can get excited about short tracks again, because I haven't been able to do that over the past couple of years.
No, not at all. And I think they realize that they have to do something to really improve the short track racing. So I'm excited. I really am. I think the overall concept, like you said, of the different tires, I'm really looking forward to this race or this whole event for the weekend.
Absolutely, and it's so cool to be at North Wilkesboro again. That coming up on Sunday night, the open race at 5 o'clock, then the All-Star race coming up at 8 o'clock, and then we'll be off to another Crown Jewel event in the Coke 600 coming up next week, and we'll be
Hard to
back.
believe.
Yeah, absolutely. We're halfway through the regular season. It's going by fast, so we'll have you back on next week to break that down and look ahead to the Coke 600.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Tyler.
Yep, appreciate it as always, Jen. Up next, one of the things in college football that I've kind of detested for a long time, maybe finally going away. I'll tell you what that is coming up. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Wednesday on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point here on the game. Tyler Head along with you here on your Wednesday. A reminder that the craft beer card is back. You can go online to 1075thegame.com, click on the Sweet Deals tab, and purchase it. A $360 value, all yours for just $79 when you spend $30 at 12 different craft beer locations. So again, the craft beer card at 1075thegame.com on the Sweet Deals tab. Yesterday, ESPN announced several kickoff times of marquee matchups going on across the first couple of weeks of college football, week 0 and week 1 specifically. And you have some pretty big games taking place. You have Notre Dame going on the road, Texas A&M, Florida State, and Georgia Tech playing over in Dublin, Ireland in the week 0 game. A lot of key matchups, but two of the bigger matchups on the weekend are Clemson and Georgia squaring off on Saturday, August 31st, and then Southern Cal and LSU squaring off on Sunday night, September the 1st. Thing about those two matchups is they are neutral site games. So you have Georgia and Clemson squaring off in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in the Aflac Kickoff Classic, which doesn't sound right because it had been the Chick-fil-A Kickoff Classic for so long. And then you have Southern Cal and LSU, and I believe the Allegiant Las Vegas kickoff. They're in Allegiant Stadium where the Raiders play. After this year, though, looking at all four of those teams, LSU is the only one that has a neutral site game scheduled. They'll be taking on Houston in 2027. Georgia doesn't have any. Clemson doesn't have any. Southern Cal doesn't have any. But Alabama, who for the longest time was always playing in some week 1 neutral site game in Orlando or Dallas or Atlanta or somewhere against some opponent from the ACC or the Big Ten or the Big 12. They don't have any scheduled. Notre Dame has a lone one scheduled against Wisconsin at Lambeau Field in 2026, but that's it. And I'm so happy about this. I think we are finally getting to the point where we're getting rid of these neutral site week 1 games, because to me, it's a slap in the face of what college football is and should be, where we have these amazing, historic venues across the entire landscape of the sport. One beautiful thing about college football is we don't tear down stadiums and build new ones every 20 years. Williams-Brice Stadium has been there forever. Sanford Stadium has been there for 100 years. Texas, where they play, has been there for a long time. Like, all these great stadiums across college football are pieces of history. Notre Dame Stadium is dripping with history of Newt Rockne, the Four Horsemen, all those kind of guys. And it's still in the same venue that it's been for 100+ years. And yes, there are innovations happening, upgrades and all that kind of stuff, but it's the true tradition of college football to play in these places that have been, full of history for as long as they've been around. And why we decided, however many years ago, to suddenly start taking games away from these venues to play them at sterile NFL stadiums is beyond me. I look at a matchup like Georgia and Clemson, which kick us off at noon, by the way, which I think is ridiculous. That should be a primetime matchup. That should be the primetime matchup on Saturday night, but it's not. And I think the fact that they're not playing in a home venue goes a long way with that. Now, there's still going to be a good crowd there. You're going to have, half orange and half red, and it's going to be sold out because it's a short drive for both fan bases there on a holiday weekend. But you're telling me you'd rather have that than seeing Clemson go into Sanford Stadium or Georgia go in to Memorial Stadium in the upstate and have to deal with the opposing fan bases and the traditions and the atmosphere of college football in a college football venue? Of course not. It'd be 1,000 times better. And like I said, I think we are finally trending away from these kind of things happening. And I understood the initial appeal of this because it creates almost a bowl-like atmosphere in week number 1. And you can have two teams square off in neutral site venues in these big cities with a lot of, tourism and stuff going on. I mean, Carolina just did it this past year, taking on North Carolina in Charlotte, which is a short drive for both teams, and brought a bunch of money and tourism and stuff to Charlotte for that weekend. But college football is becoming so backloaded with these same type of environments, it's becoming less and less feasible in my mind to ask fan bases to do this in week number 1 as well. What do I mean by that? Look at the new college football playoff that we're going into, a 12-team playoff, where in the first round, yes, I know it's advertised as campus games, but there's a caveat in that rule that if, barring weather, you have the ability to move your game into a nearby closed roof venue if you seem fit. So as much as we'd love to see a playoff game in Ann Arbor, Michigan, if it's going to be 1.5 feet of snow, guess what? They can move that game to Ford Field. They can move that game to U.S. Bank Stadium where the Vikings play because it's indoors. So we could still have neutral site NFL venues in the first round of the college football playoff after just having all the conference championship games a couple weeks before in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, in Lucas Oil Stadium, in the Cowboys Stadium, AT&T Stadium for the Big 12 championship, and whatever venue they're still playing the ACC championship game in. I think, is it Charlotte or Orlando? I know they bounce back and forth. I can't remember. But we already do that for the conference championships. You had the ability to do that in the first round of the playoffs. You get into the quarterfinals, which now you're at bowl sites, and everything with the exception of the Rose Bowl is played in an NFL stadium. The Cotton Bowl, the Orange Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, the Peach Bowl, all those NFL stadiums. And then, because your next 2 rounds, the quarterfinals and semifinals, are comprised of these bowl games, and then you get the championship game, and guess what? It's rotating through NFL stadiums. It just got announced the other day that I think 2027 is going to be in Las Vegas. So again, you have all these sterile neutral site venues for your postseason. You're already asking these fan bases to do so much traveling over the course of just over a month in December and to go to these venues. I really hope this is a trend now where we can just let regular season games take place at home venues like they should be. Like I said, Notre Dame is going on the road to A&M. That's the Saturday night, marquee matchup for week number 1. You got the gold helmets going into College Station. That's cool, man. I don't care what side. I don't care who you're rooting for in that game. It's cool to see a power and a traditional program like Notre Dame going into a venue that they're not familiar with. And if you're a fan in College Station, Texas, you get to say, wow, Notre Dame is coming to play here. And then I believe it's next year, A&M's going to go up there to play in Notre Dame Stadium. That's what makes college football so cool. And I hate that for so long we've taken these huge matchups away from places where they should be played to go shove them into AT&T Stadium, to go shove them in to Camping World Stadium in Orlando, just to pop some tourism dollars for those local cities. Marquee matchups in the regular season should be played in home environments. Now, there are exceptions to this. Of course, you have Georgia, Florida, that's always been played in Jacksonville. You have Texas and Oklahoma, that's always been played at the Cotton Bowl. I'll even give a little bit of a pass to, Arkansas and Texas A&M and Southwest Classic. I get what they're going for in Jerry World. That's fine, because there's some form of tradition tied up in those. But when you have Southern Cal and LSU playing in Las Vegas, what is this? I'd much rather see the Trojans go to Death Valley, or I'd rather see LSU go out and play in the Memorial Coliseum in L.A. That's cool, not NFL stadiums. So again, I hope we're at least trending in the right direction for these things slowly going away. And I get Carolina's got one next year in Mercedes-Benz Stadium against Virginia Tech, and hopefully that's the last one that they have scheduled for the foreseeable future. Because I would much rather see the Gamecocks go to Blacksburg or see the Hokies come down here to Williams-Brice Stadium. Because that's what makes college football great, is the environments and the settings that these home venues provide, not sterile NFL stadiums. Last night, Caitlin Clark made her WNBA debut. Didn't go as some people thought it would. And a little glimpse into how Caitlin Clark is going to be as a pro. We'll dive into that coming up. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Wednesday here on The Game.
Benley. Here's Clark, a good look from three. She got it. The first three in the career of Caitlin Clark.
It's called last night on ESPN2. Caitlin Clark making her WNBA debut, making one of 4 three-point attempts and out scoring 20 points for the Indiana Fever as they fell to the Connecticut Sun 92-71 to tip off the WNBA season. And I'll admit it, I am guilty of the Caitlin Clark effect. I, to my knowledge, can't remember watching or anticipating a WNBA opening night game more than I did last night watching the Fever and the Sun. Now, I kind of flipped back and forth between that and the Braves game, but I solidly watched most of the first quarter of that game between the Fever and the Sun because I wanted to see what Caitlin Clark looked like in her WNBA debut. Now, she came out and was a little rocky. I believe she went 0 for in the first quarter before kind of getting it clicked in gear there in the second quarter, but like I said, ends up scoring 20 points in 32 minutes of action, 5 of 15 from the field. Her first points were a layup, and then, again, 4 of 11 from beyond the arc, which, of course, is her bread and butter and her specialty. But, you know, it was a packed out Mohegan Sun Arena. A lot of people there just to see Caitlin Clark. And I'm interested to see what the ratings for this are going to be. I was just checking there that no ratings have been put out yet. And again, it's some 12 hours later, so that's a quick turnaround. But, you know, there's projections of anywhere between, 1.5 to 2 million viewers, tuning in for this and, seeing how Caitlin Clark translates to the next level, which she wasn't going to go out there and dominate like she did in college. Like we all knew that was going to happen. And it was intriguing to watch this last night to see the physicality that gets pushed towards Caitlin Clark. Because, and I think about this if I'm in the shoes of these other WNBA players, especially ones that have been around for a long time, to where this league has, again, had plenty of great talent come in from the college ranks, but none that quite moved the needle quite like Caitlin Clark. There's a reason Dawn Staley thanked her several times, in her post-game presser, as well as other occasions when she got in front of a microphone or in front of a camera, because of what Caitlin Clark did for the game of women's college basketball. She brought in so many eyes of people that otherwise would have not cared about it, saying, hey, I hear this Caitlin Clark girl is really special and can knock down a three from the parking lot. Let me go watch her, which, again, led to ratings being up and all that kind of stuff. And we're hoping in turn that means a lot of people will be tuning in for next year's women's college basketball because they were hooked on the game from watching Caitlin Clark play. Caitlin Clark was their entry point. They just wanted to, now they have a reason to stick around more, seeing somebody else blossom into that, whoever is the next superstar of women's college basketball. And a lot of those casual fans now tuning into the WNBA. But in the lead up to the draft, and Diana Taurasi had, I'd say the most viral comments on this, like a lot of these women in the WNBA don't like Caitlin Clark because she's garnering more attention than they ever had. And she's being touted as a future all-star. And, how many titles is she going to win with the Fever and all this stuff before ever setting foot on the court? And that rubs them the wrong way, and I get that. So watching Caitlin Clark last night, especially, as she's down there in traffic trying to drive to the rim, they weren't letting her get by easy. A lot of physicality, elbows, a lot of pressure. Like they were going to make that difficult on her. They wanted her to feel that presence of being in the WNBA. And then it was not going to be made easy for her. Look, she's going to catch some elbows. She's probably going to get her hair pulled. Like, it's not going to be an easy go of it for Caitlin Clark. By the way, she looked like she was 12 years old out there. Like, she's just got kind of that very young face in general. And playing out there against, some of these women that have been out there for years and years, grizzled veterans of the WNBA, made her just look even younger. And again, she still ended up having a solid performance, led her team in scoring with those 20 points. But she's not going to have the stranglehold in the WNBA that she had in college basketball, which is to be expected. You're now playing professional basketball. And the WNBA is so unique because there are so few teams that if you are on the court, you are a high-level, very experienced talent because it's that hard to get on the court because there's just so much talent that clogs up these rosters that, getting drafted in the third round of the WNBA draft doesn't guarantee you anything. Doesn't mean you're going to make the team. Doesn't mean you're going to be on the starting five or whatever it may be. Like, you got to be good to get on the court because there's so much talent that comes out every single year that's just filling these rosters. So Caitlin Clark is truly playing with the best of the best when it comes to women's professional basketball in America. And, it's going to be a learning process. Again, she's good enough. She can ascend to being one of the best that this game has ever seen at the professional level. It's not going to happen right out of the gate. It's going to take some time. She's on a team that, is still trying to build itself up and doing so with the draft over these past couple years. Leah Boston, by the way, 4 points and 6 rebounds for the Fever last night. But regardless, I think most of us, if not all of us, going to be tuning in whenever we see that Caitlin Clark is playing on TV. And the WNBA, as I said, got to milk this for all it's worth. Get her in front of as many people as possible so people don't forget. Because eventually the interest is going to wane off. You got to strike while the iron's hot. And that's what they did last night. That'll do it for today's edition of The Extra Point. Coming up next, it is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game.
There you are. Can you hear me? All right, cool. Then we're ready to go. You got, there's two at 11 and 50 end of the hour. Firehouse and Integrated.
And 100.5. The Game in Florence.
$11 Welcome in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you on this Wednesday. Guys, halfway through the month of May. The quietest portion of the college football calendar. I don't know if that's even a word to be able to say. Not a whole lot happening from a practice standpoint. This is obviously the month where players get a little bit of time off. You know, we talked to Brady Hunt last week. He's back home in Indiana getting ready for a wedding of all things. But guys being able to get away for a little bit before jumping into the grind of the summer calendar. But, you know, that's coming to an end very, very soon. They'll be reporting back on Memorial Day, I believe, and jumping into summer workouts.
Yeah, you know, the beauty of college football, especially for us, from a business standpoint, is that it does keep giving. Like, there really is almost always something to talk about. But May is, you know, especially like me and Chris, if you're going to cover recruiting as well, you better you don't get your vacations in May, but you better reset a little bit in May, because June has just weirdly become this huge month when it comes to recruiting. And then obviously for the guys themselves, they're going to be getting back not as much actual in-person coverage like you would have in the spring or preseason, but the guys obviously are very, very busy. So for coaches, they're on the road right now. A lot of them, the assistants are, but for head coaches, you got to reset right now a little bit too. And then once June hits, there's a little quick recess in July where everybody has one final breather. And then after that point, you're not done until the end of the year, basically.
Right.
Yeah, there's really only, thinking through this, a couple times that I don't know, Wes, about you, I don't really feel like it's quote-unquote slow. Like a lot of people come up to us or, y'all must be getting a break, and you're like, well, I'm trying. You know, you always just kind of move on to something else. It might not be, you know, a camp or a game or a big visit weekend, but you're spending this time to catch up on other stuff. And same thing with Shane Beamer and, you know, coaches out on the road during the month of May, right at the end of May on the 31st, you know, at South Carolina and a bunch of other places. You've got official visits that are going to start back up. Like you said, man, June has become, once summer official visits went in, the month of June became really packed, really crazy, because you've got prospects on and off your campus on official visits, on unofficial visits. And then you've got camps, 10 camps going on that we'll cover all of those at Gamecock Central as well. So really May, you know, slower, yes, than some other times, but the coaches are still out on the road. There's still some evaluations. There's new offers going out. I think July would probably be, you know, the slower one. That's when the folks in the football office are able to actually get away from the office and kind of unplug as much as a college football coach or staffer can. But there's been, you know, this opens up a bigger topic that we can talk about at some point, and that's just the college football calendar. I mean, there's been so much talk about this over the last couple years, particularly once the transfer portal came in, as far as moving different dates and times, making, you know, June's crazy, December's crazy, the football season's crazy. You know, what can they do to kind of alleviate some of that pressure?
Well, that's going to be a big talking point here very soon at the SEC spring meeting, because they're still down in Destin, I believe. But that is a topic of conversation that comes up every single year of how do you restructure and fix the college football calendar. And unfortunately, that's kind of easier said than done.
Yeah, it is, because there's no easy answer. We talked about this during the portal window. It's easy to kind of, during that first portal window, I should say, it's easy, guys, to like look at it and be like, well, why are you doing this right now? And you got bowl season going on too. And then you have to kind of reach back and realize, well, this stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. Like, if you look at the way the NFL maybe runs their schedule, they don't answer to anyone. For the most part, they're going to do what they do. With college athletics, you do still have this thing that is relatively important called class and called semesters and called graduation. So all that stuff has to actually sort of align, and it doesn't always perfectly align with the college football calendar when it comes to the athletic side of things. So I think for college football, are there maybe some things that can be done to make the calendar a little bit more streamlined? Yes, you would hope so, but it's really not one of those things. You know, sometimes you look at people making decisions, you're like, what are they doing? This should be way simpler than this. I would actually argue it's not really that simple. There's maybe no perfect way to do it. I do think, guys, the smaller window this time around for the transfer portal proved to be a good thing, Chris.
Yeah, it did prove to be a good thing, and it is hard, right? I mean, you can go through the calendar and kind of pick it apart. I think you make a great point where you got to consider academics and the different – there's not only an academic calendar, but there's different academic calendars at different places. You know, some schools use the quarter system. South Carolina, you know, you've got the semester system, and there's so much to try to fit in because there's a lot of activity in college football now. It's gone really more towards allowing players to legally do more with the staff as well. You know, there was a time where in the summer it was just players. Well, now things have been opened up to where staffers can be more involved in summer workouts. There's new proposals now about, you know, analysts being able to actually coach the players legally on game days and other situations. And so really all we've done is add more to not only the recruiting calendar, but we've added more to just, you know, when we don't have two-a-days anymore or anything like that, but there's still some limitations on how much time athletes can spend with their coaches, but they're spending a lot of time out there on their own. It's kind of understood that, yeah, you're going to do your 8-hour rule during the summer. You're going to do your 20 hours. But really, to be an elite college athlete at this level, you're going to have to go do even more, and that's just kind of understood. So between that and recruiting, there's just a lot going on. The one I feel strongest about, we do have to figure out December because it is, you know, with people trying to prep for a bowl and the portal and recruiting on your campus, recruiting off your campus, it's really just become too much. And at a time where, quite frankly, I believe coaches and these athletes need some type of postseason break as much as you can get one.
Well, for the time being, we have what we have when it comes to the calendar. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, Carolina will start its summer workouts right after or on Memorial Day, coming up here in just a couple weeks' time. And with that, you, of course, have, you know, all the guys that have been here through the spring session already, but you also welcome in a couple of very important true freshmen that were not able to make it in the spring so far, that being Matthew Fuller, Michael Smith, and Jalewis Solomon, all joining the team with those summer workouts starting here in a couple weeks. And we'll kind of go piece by piece here. Matthew Fuller, somebody that we talked about a lot in his recruitment and his commitment to South Carolina, coming into what is a very, very full running back room here, a very experienced one at that, bringing guys like Rocket Sanders and Oscar Attaway this past offseason. Yeah, and like you said, we'll go through all three guys, but I would just say, first of all, in general, three super talented kids. Like these guys, you know, you never know with high school guys coming in, that's recruiting, but I think just in terms of the baseline ability here, the potential of all three guys, you're like, these are three impressive prospects. And starting with Fuller, you know, you kind of look, like you said, the room he's coming into. If this kid was coming in last year, I'd be hyping up Fuller to maybe push at some point for a starting job, certainly to be in that top 2-3 rotation. I think I think he's that good. You know, we talk about Charles Power from On 3 a ton here on the show, and Charles said he was even hearing feedback after signing day from some people in Georgia being like, hey, how did you guys, like, let him get out of the state? Like, how did Georgia or Georgia Tech let him leave? He could be that good.
I've also received some word that he's gotten a little bit bigger since he initially was on the radar and signed, both in terms of adding some good weight, maybe even gotten a little bit taller, so his frame in general is filling out right now. And, I think for Fuller, Chris, this is a guy early on, like he's going to come in and you're going to be like, all right, he's like 5th or 6th on this depth chart. Naturally, you start at the bottom. But, I could see him just potentially, and again, the thing you never know, how quickly does a guy just start picking everything up, in terms of getting comfortable in a college weight program, college offensive system. So let's just assume that part goes pretty smooth. Would it be a complete shot, Chris, if he just kind of started chipping away and maybe quietly he passes a guy and we don't even half notice it first, and then we hear, hey, this kid's looked pretty good in practice this week. He chips away again. Then maybe somebody gets banged up. Then next thing you know, maybe he is in this rotation at some point this season.
Yeah, that's certainly one thing you don't know is how will a guy pick things up. Typically with young backs, you talk a lot about pass protection as being the biggest learning curve that they have. There are other things, obviously. Anybody that steps into a college environment, especially with the schedule that South Carolina plays, that is going to be the toughest competition that you've ever played in that individual game and then throughout the course of a season. So there's a learning curve even at running back where it's a little bit easier to get on the field as a freshman. Not that it's easier than, say, center, or offensive line, something like that. Some coaches say the closer to the ball that you play, the harder it is, right? But the other thing I would say, Wes, that you don't know is something we talk about all the time, just the injury situation. We've seen, Brandon Wilds as a freshman go from a guy who came in 5th string and because of the work he put in, but more so even at that point because of all the injuries that had piled up at running back, now you're down to that guy and it's next man up. And even though South Carolina was, very much hurting for depth last season with, behind Joyner, behind Mario Anderson, we saw Braswell as a freshman in some key moments. Remember the Kentucky game? That's something that Spencer Rattler talked about, that Shane Beamer still talks about. He's out there throwing a key block as a freshman on a touchdown pass that everybody said, hey, that won the game because that ended up being the game-winning score. So you really do never know where you may end up. And so this is a guy, I do think the good news is you don't have to have him come in and play, we don't think, but he's a guy that looks like he's capable of doing so. And I think there's some reason to get excited about him. Up 1,800 yards, I think, last season. Super productive back in high school.
Well, and I think that's a benefit compared to what Wes said a moment ago, that if this was last spring where you were depleted at running back, it's like, well, hey, you almost kind of need this guy to come in here and make an impact, where now if he proves to be one of the best running backs on the roster, then he'll find his way on the field, but it's not an immediate like, hey, that you need to come in here and contribute right away because we don't have the numbers we need right now.
Yeah, and let's play this thing out a little bit more detailed. Obviously, let's say everybody's healthy. Most of us are assuming Rocket is getting your first snap. Like, he's your guy. I think most of us probably agree at this point Oscar Attaway is probably your second guy. Based on what we saw in the spring, Jawarn Howell probably next. So if you go with that as sort of your baseline here, I think the question is, and the thing that will be fascinating, and maybe we won't even know, some of this will be happening in closed practices, and we'll be focused on other things throughout the season and the actual games, but internally, where does Fuller end up as preseason goes along, as week 1, week 2, the first month of the season goes along? Internally, who's in front when it comes to him and Juju McDowell, who's a little bit the forgotten guy in the room right now, even as someone who's been here for a while. And then Braswell, if you're him, you're sitting there saying, all right, I have a head start on Fuller. I've been here a year. Can he maintain his spot on the depth chart in terms of just comparing those two guys? So I think that's kind of something. It won't be talked about a ton. We'll all be focused on other things, but internally, that'll be something that'll be kind of fascinating in terms of those guys.
Get to the other freshmen, which includes Michael Smith and Jalewis Solomon, and their potential impact right away. Coming up next, it is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Wednesday here on The Game.
All right, guys. As always, this show brought to you by our friends at Firehouse Subs. No matter where you are in Columbia, there is a Firehouse Subs near you. Shout out to our guy, Larry, and the entire team at Firehouse Subs. You want to try something somewhat new? Try the new barbecue Cuban sub at Firehouse Subs. It is Cuban roots with a southern twist. Or get my favorite on the West Mitchell power rankings at Firehouse right now is still, it has been for months now, undefeated. The brisket add bacon. You can order it right now. 2 simple, very easy ways to do it. Go to firehousesubs.com on your computer or your phone. Probably even easier, go ahead and download the Firehouse Subs app. Set everything up right now, and it's going to make it simple every single time you want to order. Hit that rapid rescue. They're going to have your sandwich waiting for you on the shelf when you walk in with the chips in the bag. Order Firehouse Subs right now, firehousesubs.com.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Miller, and Chris Clark along with you on this Wednesday. A reminder, Gamecock baseball back in action tomorrow night as they start their final series of the regular season.
Big one.
Taking on the #1 Tennessee Volunteers. Pregame coverage starting tomorrow night at 6:15. First pitch at 6:30. Same thing on Friday. And then Saturday, a 1 o'clock first pitch, 12:45 pregame right here on the game. I want to get back into our conversation about these incoming freshmen. Talked about Matthew Fuller and the ability and he has coming into this running back room that already has a lot of talent in it. Same kind of thing with Michael Smith when you're talking about these tight ends, where, of course, you have Josh Simon returning for another year, Brady Hunt expected to be that other tight end on the other side. You have Elksnicks, you have Connor Cox, Reed McKeska filling out this room. But Michael Smith, another guy, highly touted coming out of high school, a lot of good pass-catching ability that could work his way onto the field this fall.
Yeah, I loved his film. I mean, he is a natural pass catcher. Just in terms of like catch radius, going up and getting the football, I do think, I've heard maybe he's going to have to work a little bit on his consistency in catching the football. But in terms of ability, to me, he'll instantly be the most big play capable tight end on the roster in terms of going up and getting the football. You look at his film, and he looks like just a big-bodied wide receiver out there. Now, I've said this before. Michael Smith went out of his way to be like, hey, guys, why does everybody say I'm a receiver first? Like, I can block too. He wants to prove that, which I like that. Some tight ends don't have that mindset. So sure. I love that. Chris, if we drew the line after Jawarn Howell in the running backs room, where do we draw the line in the tight ends room? And what I mean by that is I would put it after the first two guys. I tend to think that those first two guys in the room, Josh Simon, Brady Hunt, from what we've heard about him, I think those two are difficult to unseat. After that, though, there is maybe some room for a new guy if, again, he hits the ground running, learns things quickly, to potentially get into that mix.
Yeah, I mean, and the experience, I think, those guys are talented, right? Simon, Brady Hunt, those guys are talented. I have every expectation that those two guys are going to be talked about in some form or fashion as NFL prospects by the time they're done at South Carolina. I got a text this morning, actually, on Josh Simon and how he's already on the radar as one of maybe the top draft prospects out of this class. Hunt, at his size with his experience level too. But both those guys are just upperclassmen. They're so experienced at their previous schools. Simon, obviously, here at South Carolina, that I agree. They're going to be tough to unseat. And there's some other guys in the mix there too. And the interesting thing is that there's some different kind of skill sets there. Like Connor Cox is a player that doesn't get talked about really much at all, honestly. And that's despite the fact that he played last season as a true freshman, played some special teams, played some tight end. You've got Nick Elksnicks in there, who's more of that blocking type of tight end, but he's played a decent amount during his college career on special teams. Reed McKeska has unfortunately battled some injuries during his time at South Carolina on more than one occasion, but he's also got upside too. So all that to say, kind of a long-winded way of saying, I think there's some openness to this tight end room. Yeah, I don't think anybody, whether it's a Connor Cox or whether it's an incoming freshman like Michael Smith, I don't think we're going to be looking up by game one saying, okay, Josh Simon and or Brady Hunt have been jumped, leapfrogged by one of those other guys. I think they've got a pretty firm hold on 1 and 2. But, a guy like Michael Smith, could he make some noise? Could he be someone that you feel like, man, this guy can help us in some packages? Maybe this guy can help us on special teams with his athleticism, with that disposition of being willing to be physical and be aggressive? Maybe so. Either way, Wes, whether it's this year or just later, like, this guy has a lot of potential. We saw him in camp last summer, seen some of the things he can do on film. He does kind of have a knack for the spectacular catch. If he can become more consistent, this is a guy with a load of potential, I think.
I'll tell you the guy to that group that I think, just looking at him a little bit in camp last year, and he did play a little bit, the guy that I think you sort of talk about who's someone that the perception doesn't quite meet the ability, I think is potentially Connor Cox. Like, I think he's a little bit better athlete than maybe he's given credit for. I'm curious to see if he can take another step in year 2, because this is a guy that comes from a family of athletes. when you see him in person, he's bigger than you kind of expect. Just kind of, even last year, looked like somebody who was older than he is. So to me, and he's a little bit different, obviously, skill set wise than a Michael Smith, but Cox is someone that I'll be very curious to see how his preseason goes. And again, you kind of look at after those first two, there's maybe room. Also, at times, it may be more about skill set, down, distance. Do you want to put somebody in there who's a little bit more of a blocker like Elksness? Shoot, does the fact that this may be a little bit more of a run-based offense play into that in terms of what you're trying to do offensively? On the other hand, if you're wanting to put a little bit more speed out there, a little bit more playmaking ability at times, maybe Michael Smith in certain packages and certain third down situations could become a little bit more of an option for South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, Smith was a highly recruited guy. And honestly, I think that's another one that Georgia has obviously done pretty well for themselves at tight end. It's not like Georgia, even after losing Brock Bowers, is hurting at the tight end position. But that's one where you go, man, like Michael Smith at Georgia, they may look back in a few years and say, okay, Mike could have used that guy, even though we're Georgia. I know Ohio State was bummed that they couldn't land Michael Smith. So pretty highly ranked, highly recruited guy. And you just look at him physically, he's got the size, he can run, he's got, and this is not a negative. He's got receiver-like skills, but I agree with you, Wes. It is great that he's willing to be a blocker, that he's interested in that portion of the game. I think that bodes well for his future.
We'll get to the other freshman on the defensive side of the ball. That being Jalewis Solomon, and how he could potentially slide in, maybe right away, to this defense in 2024. That's next. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, as well as hear from Coach Beamer what he has to say at the Welcome Home event, presented by Firehouse Subs on your Wednesday here on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyrod Westminster and Chris Clark going through the list of freshmen that are going to be joining the team at the end of the month as summer workouts begin. Of course, these guys wrapped up their high school careers traditionally with normal graduation, all that kind of stuff, before jumping in here to Carolina, not being able to come in as early enrollees. And the last one on the list is perhaps the most intriguing because unlike Fuller, unlike Michael Smith, who are coming into rooms with already established starters, kind of already know what the pecking order looks like for the most part, Jalewis Solomon comes in on the secondary of the defense with one gaping hole still kind of wide open, that opposite quarter spot of O'Donnell Fortune. And even Beamer himself has said, hey, Solomon could be in the mix for that.
I thought it was a little bit telling that without being asked about Jalewis Solomon, without him being mentioned at all, in the spring, just talking about cornerbacks in general, Beamer said, hey, this Jalewis Solomon guy, he's going to be in the mix when he gets here as well. And, that wasn't, oh, he's going to start. That wasn't, hey, we think this guy's going to come in and pass everybody. But just to mention his name, Beamer's not really a guy that often just singles out guys for nothing. And so, to me, that was very telling. And, Chris, I think we've both heard sort of separately some things behind the scenes as well that basically have been like, hey, wait till this guy gets here. We think he's going to be able to make an impact this year. That's not just lip service. That wasn't just a throwaway line. I think internally the expectations for Jalewis Solomon this year as a true freshman are very high. Again, but to me, I always go back. The older I get, I always go back to a guy has got to find a way to hit the ground running, and some guys just pick things up quicker than others. So I think it'll be very telling maybe that first month that he's on campus if we can get some information on how quickly he is settling in Columbia.
Yeah, I agree. And not to diminish, because this is an example that Shane Beamer brings up a lot for some different things, just how Nick Emanwari, was able to step forward. And even though they didn't enroll, Nick Emanwari and DQ Smith, even though they didn't enroll in January, they were summer enrollees, they were able to come in as true freshmen and make significant impacts as starters, guys who played really well. And now they're in their third year with the program, obviously. I think there's some differences this time around with a guy like Jalewis Solomon. He's stepping into a situation where the cupboard is not quite as bare in terms of personnel. You've got O.D. Fortune, where I put him kind of in the same category as a Josh Simon and Brady Hunt at tight end at the corner position. It's very hard to envision anybody coming in and unseating O.D. Fortune with how much football he's played and what the staff thinks of him. But the other spot is pretty open. Now, I think the good news is that the staff seems to feel like Vakari Swain has progressed, and they seem to feel like Emory Floyd has progressed. And then Judge Collier, who, even though he was the only one of those previous guys that I've mentioned that actually started and played a good bit last year, kind of the forgotten man. They feel good about him too, right? But could there be a role for Jalewis Solomon? We've heard it for a long time. As soon as South Carolina, really not even as soon as they landed him, during the recruiting process, it was like, this is a guy who is really good, who could come in and help us if we could land him immediately. And so they were able to do that in that battle with Auburn. It's a guy that did a lot of different things at the high school level, played all three phases of the game, can make an impact with the ball in his hands, but he's just one of those natural football players. And I agree with you, Wes. I think it's telling that we've consistently heard this about Solomon, and I think it's telling and interesting that we continue to hear it even though the staff seems to feel pretty good about their options at corner. That probably just speaks to how highly they think of Solomon.
I feel much better about that cornerback spot than I did probably entering the spring. I'll be the first to admit I thought maybe they should have gone out and gotten a portal guy. From what I've seen, from what I've heard, I think maybe they made the right call. Of course, time will tell that when they play, when they play other people, when they face opponents. But I think you feel a lot better about that. I think you got to be very encouraged about Vakari Swain's progress there. Also, hey, if those other guys beat out Vakari Swain, if Solomon comes in and he's ready to play, do you, maybe this is more just a radio, online, Twitter fan discussion, but do you reopen the possibility of Vakari Swain playing some wide receiver? You know, I think if Vakari Swain is like a starter, if he just is like, guys, he just lets his play show I'm too good not to start, which is possible, then obviously you're done with that conversation, in my opinion. But if he's good but is kind of behind some of these other guys, I think you owe it to yourself, especially, you go back, Beamer talked yesterday. He said, look, if you ask me who the 6 to 8 wide receivers are right now and what order they're in, I don't know. They still have to decide that for themselves. So do you re-enter him into that conversation? Chris, if Swain stays at corner, if those 3 guys that we've talked about continue to come on at that spot, what do you think the chances are that Solomon is the backup nickelback this year behind Jalen Kilgore?
I like it, and I think he's actually pretty well suited to play that position. If you just go back and watch his film, I think Solomon's probably good enough to, play anywhere in the secondary. You could tell me right now, hey, Torian Gray really thinks Jalewis Solomon can play safety. I'd be like, all right, sounds good. I think he can play anywhere. I like it. And the one question I have, Wes, is, with the personnel that you have across the board at nickel and safety, do we see a situation where you play some matchups? You remember when South Carolina had Marcellus Dial, Cam Smith, and Darius Rush, you would see kind of some matchup playing there. And you also had a situation where Marcellus Dial was basically your third corner and ended up playing more snaps than Darius Rush or Cam Smith, which is very interesting. I don't know, but I do think you have some flexibility there where you can say, hey, this particular guy can slide to nickel in this situation. It's just theoretical right now, right? I'm not reporting that they're going to do that. I don't really know. But you do look across the board, and I think you have a good bit of competition at corner. I'm like you, that was a spot where I think both of us, after last year, you just look at who they lost. You lose Dial after having just lost Rush and Smith. And you go, okay, OD's still on the roster. But, hey, in this era of the transfer portal and plug and play, you probably need to go find a guy. The staff really kind of stood pat once, OD Fortune decided to come back to South Carolina for another year. And that looks like a move that was, it wouldn't have been a bad move if they went and got a portal corner. But it looks like a move that makes total sense because now you've got, you've got 4 guys really that are going to be vying for that other spot. Whoever doesn't win it can go play some nickel, or they can play some in situations. They can go play special teams. So I think it's certainly a situation where Solomon is only going to add to that depth in that competition, whether it's nickel or at corner.
Well, and I think about how important that depth is and whether he is, starting at corner or maybe back up there or at the backup safety spot, like you said, maybe behind a guy like Collier, as we've seen the past couple seasons, behind Kilgore. Both Kilgore and Eamon Warrior were thrust into starting roles very quickly because of injuries that happened in the secondary. So it's something that, unfortunately, Carolina has a track record of guys being thrown to the wolves very, very quickly, but you feel like if Solomon was put in that position, as those 2 guys were, he could step up and perform.
Yeah, and as was DQ Smith his first year. So, I think you look at all those guys, I mean, it was almost it was just insane how similar it was what happened with Kilgore in game 1 compared to what happened with Eamon Warrior game 1 of his freshman career. I mean, the parallels there were kind of crazy. So I think South Carolina, if you kind of look at where they are across the board at that, I put safety and nickel somewhat in the same category. I think we saw them experiment with all 3 guys at nickel. They tended to ultimately decide on, DQ and Nicky at safety, Jalen at nickel as being the best spot. Now, Chris, I do think that's a good point there. You could potentially have a little bit more depth there where you could run out there a more kind of hybrid sort of role. Like we see a lot of teams do that now, including South Carolina, where the nickel on first and second down is more of like a fast Sam linebacker almost, but it would give you some opportunities to roll a guy out there depending on down and distance, but also opponent, like a Tennessee. If a team is more spread, does it give you a little bit more flexibility to do some of those things? I don't think South Carolina has, other than the three guys we just talked about, there's not a bunch of household names at cornerback yet, but I do think internally they probably feel pretty good about their options at this point, including Solomon. And I feel pretty good about Torian Gray being the guy to get the most out of that group too.
Yeah, and real quick, guys, I mean, to your point, Wes, about the lack of household names, I mean, Darius Rush, not a household name, NFL player. Marcellus Dow, not a household name. Cam Smith, people knew about because he was a 4-star prospect. I think he was a top 100 guy, Georgia wanted him, had a bunch of offers, right? But Torian Gray has a knack for taking some of those. I mean, Nicky Manwari, DQ Smith, the two guys we just talked about, he's taken some of Jalen Foster, former walk-on to All-American. He's shown a knack to develop guys. And so even if they've got guys that are not household names, they've tended to churn some out by the time they're done here at South Carolina.
We'll come back and wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Hear a little bit of what Beamer had to say last night at the Welcome Home event up in Spartanburg. That's next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. Tyler Ed, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark along with you for a few more minutes. Coach Beamer was out at another welcome home event last night out in Spartanburg. Talked about a number of things. Now these guys have officially joined the roster here at South Carolina, signed all their stuff, and are on campus. He was finally able to talk about the new wide receivers that came in the transfer portal last week. And here, cut number 19, Dave, is Coach Beamer talking about them.
Added depth for one. Guys that have, with Dale Vaughn, he's a guy that has played a lot of football, been very productive as a player. We were looking after spring practice to try to add a little bit more size to that room. He's a big receiver as well, and he'll certainly help us there. Just being a veteran guy. And then with Vandravius, he's a guy that highly recruited to come out of high school, and he can run, and that's what we like. He's still young, like the fact that he's still got 4 more years of college as well, and really all we know about him right now is talking to high school coaches, talking to their coaches where they came from, spending time with them when they came in on a visit, watching their tape that they had going into this season. But we'll find out even more about them once they get on campus. But 2 great young men that really enjoyed visiting with when they were here on visits, and excited about how they can just continue to add to the overall depth and competition in that room.
And I think that's the biggest thing is these guys just add more bodies to the room, more competition to see whoever shakes out to be the top group of wide receivers when the season does roll around. Of course, Campbell, addresses the need that we talked about a lot, was having one of those definitive bigger wide receivers to play that X spot on the outside, while you're still waiting for Harbor to come along. And then Jacobs is a guy with a lot of eligibility left, was a redshirt this past year at Florida State that, could be a contributor, assuming he sticks around for several years here at South Carolina.
Yeah, and I said this when they first committed to South Carolina. I still treat Jacobs in terms of my expectations like a freshman. He is a redshirt freshman. It, to me, is similar to getting a freshman, like high school newcomer. He kind of replaces Kelton Henderson if you're looking at it from a scholarship standpoint. They're the same class. And if he contributes this year, great. If he doesn't, that doesn't mean it's a failure because he is still a young guy. Now, Campbell, he's got 1 year of eligibility left. So this is it for him. And certainly if you take a 1 year guy, you are expecting them to contribute in some way, whether that is as a rotational guy or as a starter. And Chris, I think the more you kind of read and learn about Campbell, the more you realize this is not your kind of slow, kind of sluggish, big outside receiver. This is a guy who can run. He's got some verified track times from high school that are very impressive. And he comes from a place that had some real struggles at the quarterback position. So I don't want to sit here and say, yeah, he's just going to come right in and be the leading receiver and beat out everybody else. At the same time, I don't know, Chris, if you can completely throw out that possibility either.
I agree with you. He's one of the more interesting guys on the team right now, as far as the skill set, the fact that he didn't go through spring, so we don't have a baseline. There are a bunch of guys on the roster, I think, that went through spring, that did some good things, that are now going to have the summer and the preseason to make another leap. With Campbell, now he's on campus, he'll go through summer workouts, he'll go through preseason. But all we really have to go on is his time at Nevada, started his career at Illinois, played a couple seasons at Nevada, and you're right, they really, really struggled. Again, I've thrown out this stat before. Xavier Leggett had more receiving touchdowns as an individual last year than their entire team had. So, and I think Campbell had 2 or 3 of those last season. What you do see in him is a legit, 6'4" guy who, like you said, is not lumbering. He can run. He was a track guy. He can run. He can get downfield. And he has the knack for the spectacular catch. If you go back and find some of his Nevada film, you'll see, a couple one-handers. You'll see some diving catches. So when you take a guy who has not been at a spot, frankly, that maximized his talents, and he's still got some potential, but also does have enough playing experience to where it's not going to be the biggest learning curve in the world for him as soon as he steps, into the program here in Columbia. That's very, very interesting to me. And so now that they've added these 5 transfer receivers and a couple freshmen, I think now we still don't know who 1 through 6 is, so to speak, in this room. But you can kind of see, all right, there's more depth here as far as guys that can play. Now it's just how productive can you be and who are your starters and what does that rotation look like?
Well, I still don't know the 1 through 6. It does seem like for everything you guys kind of learned through spring that Larvadane's maybe kind of the leader at this point in time. What that means at this point, we don't know, but we certainly heard the most about him and certainly saw that in the spring game as well.
Yeah, and I think, guys, the question then becomes, like, how do you slot these guys? Who is the X receiver? You know, what is Nick Harbor's role this year? Does it allow you to play a Larvadane or a Jared Brown in the slot? Who, you know, if one of those guys is in the slot, who's playing that other outside spot? Like, I look at it like this. I think you still have a lot of questions there in terms of if you just shut your eyes and said, hey, give me the top 6 receivers this coming year. It would be really hard to predict it. But have you given yourself a lot of potential answers? Yes. Like I think that's a much different situation than you're looking at your roster and saying, hey, guys, we got questions and we don't have any potential answers here. You don't know which guys are going to be the answers, Chris, but you at least know that you have some possibilities.
Yeah, that's the thing. Do you have a Xavier Legette on this team who's a first-round pick? Let's not close the book on what any of these guys individually could be. I think you got to say no. I don't. You know, we didn't even think Xavier Legette would be a first-round pick going into last season, right? So I think a guy or two could emerge and really step up. You might not have that alpha, but do you have a more well-rounded room of, you know, more guys that are capable to where you don't have such a drop-off when a guy like Legette isn't on the field? I do think that's what you have, and that was a big point of emphasis this offseason. You had to increase the depth and competition in this room.
We'll jump back into more of our ceilings and floors in the SEC coming up tomorrow. It's been the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Wednesday halftime show. Myself and Terry Ford coming up next here on The Game.
.1075 The Game. Broadcasting live from the Herndon Chevrolet Studios. Save $20K on new Silverados. Stop by or shop online today and see why Herndon.
All right, guys, let us tell you about one more great sponsor. It's our friends over at Integrated Media. Head on over to integratedmediainc.com or just give them a call right now, 803-948-8327. If you go to integratedmediainc.com, you can get some great ideas of all the things that they've done at homes throughout the Columbia, South Carolina area. They've been at Chris Clark's home. They've been at my home. One day we're going to send them over to Tyler's apartment and let them see what they can do there. Whether it's smart home integrations, whether it's home theater, you can take an extra room and turn it into your own home theater. Anything involving audio and visual, TV installations, or even security, including cameras at your home. They can handle it. Again, ideas at integratedmediainc.com or call them today, 803-948-8327.